Greetings, urban farmers, gardeners, and healthy food visionaries. Farmer Greg here, and welcome to the 525th episode of the Urban Farm Podcast, where every day we work to educate and inspire you to become part of your food revolution. Have you thought about why you do what you do? This is a daily process for me, and it is the reason I put so much energy and money into producing our Urban Farm Podcast. What you may not know is that it costs $158 per episode to get you this incredible information. And as you can hear, we don't do sponsorships, as we want to keep our message as clean as possible. It has always been my intent to pay for our podcast production with our online content sales, and that hasn't worked very well. So we're trying something new, and I need your help so that we can continue delivering this great content. And quite honestly, this is an easy learning-filled request. I've teamed up with some amazing gardening visionaries to host a free online edible backyard summit the week of March 23rd. When you attend, you'll get free access for the week to the knowledge of these food growing experts and have an opportunity to get your burning questions answered live. Plus, we're going to release 5 modules of our comprehensive Growing Food the Basics course so that you can dig deeply into the fundamental concepts that will set you up for success no matter where you're at in your food growing journey. So here's what I need. The most helpful thing you can do is to share our ediblebackyardsummit.com page far and wide with your friends on social media, in your garden clubs, and probably places we've never even thought about. Next, please attend the free Edible Backyard Summit. My hope is that some of you will dive in, support our work, and purchase the extended summit and learn more about gardening and creating your own edible backyard. Our intent with this Edible Backyard Summit is for you to discover how you can truly thrive with a healthy life and get reconnected with your food while learning how to live a more self-reliant life, feeling secure knowing that you have a food supply right in your backyard. When you attend the Edible Backyard Summit, you'll be part of a community of people from around the world that are all on a mission to make their backyards and patios into an edible paradise. Whether you're starting your first garden or maintaining an existing one, you will come out of this summit feeling revitalized and re-inspired to make growing and eating food the celebration it should be. Sign up for free by going to ediblebackyardsummit.com or texting backyard to 33444. I look forward to seeing you there. Today on our podcast, we have someone who is seeking climate change solutions through sustainable farming investments. We're talking with David Chan about regenerative agriculture. David is the co-founder and COO of FarmTogether. He has spent several years working in the organic agriculture value chain. Before forming FarmTogether, David was a senior private equity associate at AMERRA Capital Management, where he worked closely with one of the fund's portfolio companies having a focus on supply chains in sustainable agriculture and serving the U.S. grains market. David also worked with SLM Partners, PGIM Ag Equity Investments, and was a finalist in Patagonia's first case competition on scaling regenerative agriculture. Welcome to the show today, David. Are you ready to rock?
Yeah, Greg, let's do it.
Excellent. So I shared a bit about you. Can you fill in the blanks for us and share more about the path you took to get where you're at today?
Absolutely. So I grew up in the Hudson Valley in New York State. I grew up around apple orchards, and ag was always in my backyard. I'd never expected to end up building a career here. I've always been interested in meteorology and climate, grew up with blizzards, tornadoes, you name it. And so that led me to study atmospheric science and climate at Cornell University.
Oh,
and
nice.
While I was at Cornell, and by the way, the plan was get a PhD and save the world from climate change through academia. While I was there, I realized we already knew so much about climate change and great research had already been written. What we were missing were implementers, folks taking those ideas, those warnings, and building solutions to combat them. And so my path deviated towards one where I found myself asking, what are other functional ways of taking what we know and building solutions? So I found finance and business to be an incredibly powerful tool towards doing that. And so my path veered from science and research to investing and finance. My first job out of college was at a bank called Barclays Capital, and I was able to build a core skill set there. I then and joined a startup company in the ag data space called Grow Intelligence as an early employee and helped build the business development team there before going to business school. And then I used my MBA experience at Harvard to really combine all of these experiences and start to venture out into a career of being an agricultural investor. So that's really how I landed here. It was by virtue of a rooted long passion in studying climate.
Nice. And so how do you explain to people exactly what it is you do before you came to FarmTogether and then as FarmTogether? What is it that you do?
Certainly. So I help people invest in agriculture. So a statistic that really stood out to me, and it was something we thought about a lot at my prior organization, AMERRA Capital, was the distribution of private investment across different sectors. And so agriculture is generally 10% global GDP, 1% of private investment. Energy, on the other hand, is 10% private investment and 1% of global GDP.
Interesting.
And so I always wondered, and don't get me wrong, energy is an incredibly important industry as well, but I would argue, why is there such a difference? Why is there this parity between ag and energy? And so, I firmly believe this is an underinvested industry. And as an asset class, farmland real estate, I would argue, is one of the most stable asset classes out there that's available for investors.
You think?
It's another flavor of real estate, and at first pass, I think it can be confusing for folks, and investors think, oh, do I need to learn how to farm? There's a lot of education that goes around it, but once you start to get your head around it, you realize it's just another form of real estate, and an incredibly important one, and one that shapes our society, and one that's important to all of our well-beings. And so from not only a financial perspective, but from a social perspective as well, I just think access into this incredible asset class needs to be improved. And so that's really what led me to co-found FarmTogether and build investment products that can be accessed by retail investors, not just large endowments and institutions.
Mm-hmm. So when you say investing in agriculture land, what is that? Let's start there.
Sure. So investing in agricultural land would be owning an equity stake of a farm. So the same way you can own a house via a mortgage, or maybe you paid your mortgage off and so you own the whole house, or you can own a franchise, or you can own a rental property and lease it out to a tenant. You can do that same structure in farmland. You can lease a farm to an operator who does the farming and pays you rent, and you're getting you're basically getting two return streams. You're receiving annual rent, and you're also going to enjoy the underlying appreciation of the land itself. And land is tied closely with inflation. It's a great inflation hedge. It's been very resistant in past recessions. It's a real asset. It's a tangible asset that doesn't go away. It's not intangible. It's not invisible. It's not a cloud-based solution that doesn't really exist. It will always be there, and we are not making any more of it. So for those reasons, we think it's a really interesting alternative for investors who understand the benefits of having real estate investments.
So do I need $100,000 to invest with you, or what does that platform look like? If I had $1,000 and came to you, is that something that I could invest with you?
So today we are serving the accredited investor community, which means that there are some qualifications as an investor that you would need to meet in order to invest in our current offerings. And we list those all on our website. But, generally the minimum investment size for our deals range between, I'd say, a minimum of $25,000 to $50,000. We hope over time that we are able to continue to bring those minimums down. But for context, previously, prior to the advent of crowdfunding, if you wanted to open a separately managed account at one of the large institutional farmland funds, I know a couple have minimums in the ballpark of $100 million. And so while I don't want to be naive, $50,000 is still a good amount of capital. It's significantly less than what has been the barrier in the past. And so that's what we're working on now. And stay tuned for new products. We hope to continue to expand that frontier and make the asset class more accessible.
Nice. And how is the success of FarmTogether working? What kind of positive or negative feedback have you been getting from people? And
received a lot of positive feedback from investors in the content that we produce and the way that we explain the asset class. And I think investors appreciate just having the opportunity to take the time to learn and become comfortable. And we certainly understand that. Personally, I would not invest in something that I didn't understand. And so we start there. We need to make this simple enough for folks to understand. We try to do that via a variety of media. We write thought pieces, white papers. We manage an active blog. We're active on social media, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and we also produce webinars on all topics, but especially related to specific offerings. Anytime we have a new offering, we will always have at least one webinar. We usually have 2 or 3 where we discuss the offering, walk through the merits, walk through the risks, and take time to address any questions that our listeners may have on the offering. And so I think one major piece of positive feedback has been that our clients really appreciate that we take the time to develop all of this content for them. And I'm trying to think if we received any negative feedback. Sometimes I think we've come across a few folks who I think misunderstand what we're trying to do. And so we've been accused by some folks of taking advantage of farming families or, making it harder for a farming family to continue to survive under the same lifestyle they've had. That's simply not true.
Yeah.
What we're doing on the purchase side, when we find a farm that we really like, that we think would be a great property for our clients, we can provide flexible capital solutions for the sellers. To date, they may not have even come across these options because, generally speaking, ag finance has been pretty vanilla and there hasn't been much creativity behind structured sales. And so one example of this is, we're speaking with a family in Connecticut that is operating a farm that has been owned in that family since, I believe, 1902.
Wow.
And the family the sibling really does not want to let the farm go, but the other owners that are also family members are thinking about estate planning. And so there's some pressure on, what's going to happen to this wonderful historic farm. And so something that we can do, a solution that we could bring to the table in this situation is that we can structure a fundraise where we essentially syndicate out the portion of the farm or however much of the value of the farm that they're looking to liquidate, the heirs who want to get out of the farming business. And we can leave the sibling who is passionate about the farm and wants to continue farming as a residual owner. So they will continue to own a piece of that farm. And we can also work with them to make sure that they can continue operations as well. And so here's a solution that's now being offered where everybody wins. Folks who are looking to leave the farm get out. Folks who are looking to continue the farm can stay in. And rather than lose a farm and see another shopping mall set up,
right,
or apartment building built in a beautiful area on the Long Island Sound in historic Connecticut, we'll retain a farm that's been there since 1902. So, I think folks just don't understand, what our motivations are. And we're just as much about wanting to help farmers and farming families looking to figure out estate planning and how they're going to move forward with the next generation of their land as we are in serving our clients.
Yeah. Well, and that's a brilliant solution, the one you just proposed. It sounds to me like you're giving farming families an opportunity to be able to cash out to a certain extent of a farm, but not shut the farm down.
Absolutely. And, and the other thing is owning a farm for so long and managing it for decades, it's an emotional asset.
Yeah.
It's everything. I mean, these folks put their blood, sweat, and tears into this piece of land, and the last thing they want to see is an apartment building to go up there. And so, it's honestly a very emotionally charged discussion because real estate developers will flock. Of course, these are prime targets for certain developers. They'll flock to these properties, and they'll give very compelling bids very compelling offers to the sellers. And, I could understand after a while, if you're trying to figure this out for a couple of years and no one's coming through and you can't figure out how to continue it as a farm, but you have 3 offers on the table, all very promising. It's difficult. It's difficult to justify to the other owners why to hold out, why to keep staying patient, and why is it important to maintain this historic piece of land as a farm. And so we empathize with that greatly. And a big part of FarmTogether's thesis and why we exist, we just think, and we don't, I would say it's even more than think. We have confidence in this because it comes from experts of U.S. Ag. The amount of land that's going to transfer in the next 20 years is astonishing. At a minimum, experts are predicting that 50% of all U.S. farmland is going to trade hands in the next 20 years alone. That's roughly meaning trade ownership.
Yeah, and how much
there's going to be a transaction.
Yeah, and how much do we know? How much of that is going to be shifted away from ag land?
So that's impossible to know. But if there is not market infrastructure in place to support these transactions, I would venture to say it would be a higher number versus a lower number. Yeah. And so we need more. That's why we exist. We need FarmTogether, and we need others to assist both the sales and purchases of these farms in order to ensure that they stay farms. The U.S. has lost twice the size of the state of Massachusetts in farmland over the past 2 decades.
Wow. Well, that's a problem because we all need to eat.
Absolutely. It's incredibly important for our well-being. It's important for our trade relationships with other countries. It's important for our national security during wartime. Mm-hmm. There are big macro reasons why a country wants to be self-sufficient in food production. And I would argue that's why U.S. farm subsidies are so strong. This is a heavily subsidized industry by the U.S. government. I think that will never go away, no matter if someone wearing red or blue is in the Oval Office. It's just critically important strategically to the U.S. to maintain its status as a leading producer of agricultural products.
Yeah. Wow. This is an amazing conversation, and I want to shift it a little bit to talking about organic agriculture, regenerative agriculture, and I have a few questions for you before we actually shift into our other questions. And in your bio, you talked about an organic agriculture value chain. Can you tell everybody what that is? That's really important.
The organic certification that the USDA has created is a signal to consumers, you and me, every time we go to a grocery store and we want to support organic agriculture. That certification is based on a number of principles that need to be followed throughout not only the production process, but also the processing of the actual agricultural good. And this is something that I think most consumers are not aware of. I was not aware of until I actually began working with this portfolio company, Pipeline Foods, during my tenure at AMERRA Capital Management. And so, I guess to put a little bit more color behind this, imagine the situation where you're a farmer, you go through farming in a conventional manner, you want to transition to organic. First off, it's at minimum a 3-year process to transition to organic. Your yields are going to go down through that period, and you're not able to put an organic label on any of your production. And so you're not seeing any price premiums there. So first off, it's just from a rational economics perspective, it's a tough decision to make. But let's say you move forward with it. Fast forward 3 years, let's say you now are blessed with the certification and you look to sell your wheat or corn or soy for processing, perhaps by a pasta company or a cereal company. If the elevator or the processor that you are looking to sell to is not an organic certified elevator, if your grain touches a conventional elevator, it immediately loses its organic certification. That is no longer organic product. And so the price premium disappears, and all of those costs and all of that time that went into the arduous transition process was for none.
The value chain is making sure that you have a organic certified pathway from basically the farm to the grocery store.
Absolutely. And it's having the midstream assets, be it an elevator or a hauler, whatever it may be, to ensure that organic, that whatever the raw material is that was farmed and certified to be farmed in an organic manner stays under the organic regulations and can reach the shelf of the grocery store with an organic label.
Nice. And we've maybe touched a little bit on regenerative agriculture, but let's dig into that. What is regenerative agriculture?
I'd say there's no uniform answer. There are a number of different think tanks and organizations that have done extensive research on regenerative ag, and I'll preface it with there's no one standard definition, but I'd say that there is a consensus on what the concept is. At the end of the day, regenerative organic agriculture, the name regenerative is really important here. It means you're building topsoil, you're building soil health each time you farm. You are not depleting the soil of nutrients. You are not leaving the soil, absent of key micronutrients by, a number of different industrial processes that we've seen emerge over time. You are using practices like cover cropping, no-till, crop rotations. You're promoting biodiversity to the extent that there could be a grass-fed or pasture-fed or pasture-raised cattle. You're employing that. You are considering soil health, animal welfare, and social fairness across the production spectrum. And at the end of the day, you are improving the health of the topsoil. And subsequently, what we are learning is you can also sequester carbon from the atmosphere by farming this way. And so this is the closest thing that I've found to a carbon sucking machine.
And there's a lot of people out there that agree with you on that. Have you read Marie Rodale's book?
Yeah. So the Rodale Institute is one of those leading organizations that has been studying this field. I may be incorrect on the exact date, but I believe since the 1980s. So this is not a new concept. It's just now taking shape and starting to be lobbied and championed by both consumers and CPG companies. But yes, it's an excellent book, and the Rodale Institute is certainly one of the leading the thought leaders on regenerative organic agriculture, and actually recently is issuing a new certification called the Regenerative Organic Certification, which will be a signal to consumers that the food that they are buying was farmed under these practices and is having this positive impact on our soil and on our environment. And so it's really exciting to see that come to fruition, because we're starting to see the market develop just as we witnessed the organic market develop, a decade or a little more ago.
Wow. So you participated in Patagonia's case competition on scaling regenerative agriculture. That sounds fascinating. Tell me more about that.
Absolutely. So this MBA case competition or graduate student level case competition that was hosted by Patagonia. It's hosted every year and the theme changes. But when I was a first year MBA student, the theme was scaling regenerative agriculture. And so we assembled a team from Harvard and worked really hard on a proposed solution, which was essentially creating a loan or favorable financing to help farmers during the costly transition process that we just spoke about earlier, which, by the way, now Rabobank, in partnership with Pipeline Foods, just put together this concept of a transitional financing. So it's really exciting to see this all coming together. But in any event, we were named a finalist. We were able to travel to the University of California at Berkeley and present to Patagonia's senior management. And so Rose Marcario, the CEO of Patagonia, was 10 feet in front of us listening to our idea on how we can use transitional labeling and favorable financing to try to incentivize more farmers to make the transition towards regenerative and organic ag. And it was just, for me, it was an incredibly important experience because I just was not aware of all of the promise and all the possibility that regenerative could hold. And it really inspired me to take the career path that I am now on and try to use finance as a way to accelerate more investment and more transition towards this manner of farming.
Well, and Patagonia has really dove really deep into this regenerative ag, and they're supporting farmers to go that direction, are they not?
They absolutely are. So Patagonia has been truly a trailblazer in regenerative ag. They opened a division called Patagonia Provisions, which is a food label, and they make a number of different foods, perfect foods for those who enjoy the outdoors and need something convenient. So they have protein bars and soups and things like that, and all of it is regeneratively produced. And not only is Patagonia, I'd say the biggest thing that any CPG company can do is establish a value chain and create products for consumers. So I think that alone, by having Patagonia Provisions and sourcing these regeneratively farmed products, that goes such a long way in moving the needle. But beyond that, they also established a venture capital fund called Tin Shed Ventures, and they invest in startups that are developing technologies to help quantify the amount of carbon that's being sequestered through the regenerative process and ultimately accelerate our understanding of regenerative ag. So, it really starts with the leadership. Yvon Chouinard is just truly just a leader who understands the responsibility that he and other senior executives have to improve our odds at being able to maintain our environment. And he and Rose and the entire leadership team are doing just a tremendous job in their work and pushing the industry forward, but also forcing competitors to go to the whiteboard and say, what can we do? I think that's an important side effect of it.
And there was also something called TerraTone that you participated in. Tell me that. Yes.
So we are very excited about the TerraTone Challenge at FarmTogether. So the TerraTone Challenge is a global challenge that it's an inaugural, and it's being hosted by Indigo Ag. And the challenge basically is, how do we use regenerative agriculture to sequester 1 trillion tons of carbon from the atmosphere? And TerraTone and Indigo have developed a really powerful network of growers who are either farming regeneratively or want to learn how to farm regeneratively and are looking to, essentially create this ecosystem. They are also developing a carbon market where they are going to be offering growers who do grow under regenerative conditions an additional financial incentive per acre. And then they are taking the responsibility of forming and being able to quantify the carbon credit that's created through that farming and sell it to regulated entities like airline companies and energy companies. So it's incredible. It's an incredible opportunity, and it's comprised of over 30 companies. I think 260 or so applied, and they were able to narrow the list down to 30 or 35. FarmTogether is lucky enough to be one of those semifinalists. And so where they see promise in what we can do is, there are a number of investors, impact investors and mission-oriented investors, who are eager to, invest capital and make this happen. They just don't have a way to do it. So today, there are few investment products that are out there that achieve these goals. And so Indigo and TerraTone see us as the capital solution, the marketplace solution towards being able to finance this transition to regenerative agriculture. And we're lucky to be part of this wonderful cohort with other companies that are going to help us quantify the amount of carbon that's sequestered and really report all of the great positive impact that's being done and achieved through this method of farming.
Wow. You can find, I just looked them up real quick. You can find them at indigoag.com. Definitely want to go check that out. So I'm going to shift on you, and I'd like for you to talk about a time you failed, how you overcame that failure, and what you might have learned from it.
So there's a few examples to go through, but I'll share one this one always seems to come to mind. So I shared earlier that I studied atmospheric science in college, and part of our course requirements for that degree program was taking physics. And so I know it's very scary. I still have scars. And I was in electricity and magnetism, which was the second semester of physics. And it was truly a foreign language to me. I could not figure this subject out no matter how much I tried. And I remember we have this big event at Cornell called Slope Day. It's a big concert. And, usually people are out having fun. I was in my physics professor's office during office hours trying to figure out how I could pass this class. And this professor shared with me this anecdote on how he was taking an English class in college and received, I think, a D or C or something like that, but, was in danger of failing, and had the same conversation that I was having with him with his English professor. And the English professor said to him, English isn't for everyone. It seems like you do really well in STEM. So, keep going down the physics route and you'll be fine. And he finished that story and said to me, I think physics is your English. That was very uncomforting, to be truthful. But
Yeah.
in any event, there was no way around this. I needed to get through this class, and so I was lucky enough. I actually had a great friend who helped me study. Friend at the time, she is now my wife. So things
Nice.
that friendship progressed nicely. But she helped me study as much as she could, and I was able to just squeak by. But I just remember being so humbled in that class, and I've never dealt with a subject before where no matter how much time I put in, just nothing was sinking. And so I often think back to that experience and how challenging it was. And when I'm looking to get through a situation, I just think if I could get through electricity and magnetism, I can get through this.
There you go. No kidding. And your biggest success?
Truly following what I'm passionate about and building a career in this very niche area where it's not like there are a million opportunities everywhere, and we had to start a company in order to do this, but it's something that we believe very much in. And anyone who's listening who is a founder or has ever been part of an entrepreneurial venture, understands that every day is a roller coaster, and you get knocked down a few times often, and you need to get right back up. And so I think my biggest success is taking a leap of faith and starting FarmTogether, and more broadly, just continuing to follow my passion and being devoted to a career in agriculture.
Nice. And what drives you?
It really goes back to what I shared earlier. I firmly believe that this industry holds the most promise towards providing the world with a solution to climate change. I think regenerative organic agriculture is a very big piece of that. I think the way we use our land, the food that we as a society decide to eat, the quantities that we decide to eat, all have profound impacts on our society and our environment. And so being at the very top of that value chain, being at the farm gate level where it all begins, there's just tremendous change that can happen for the good there. And so, for me, it's really rooted in this passion of just understanding that climate change is not something to believe in. It's a scientific phenomenon that's real, and it's happening every single day at a faster pace than it was happening yesterday. And I have to do my small part in helping us have a shot at providing our children and our children's children with an environment that's as favorable as the one that we have all grown up in.
Amen to that. And if you could recommend one book for our listeners, what would it be and why?
I think the book that I would recommend is one that I actually read for the first time in high school, but I've read many times since. And it is Night by Elie Wiesel. It is a book of a 25-year-old man survived concentration camps in World War II. It's a terribly sobering and difficult book to read. However, for me, it's important for a number of reasons. One, I think resilience is just an incredible skill that everyone should strive to build and continue building. And this author, I don't think there's any comparable example of resilience to being able to get through that unimaginable experience and then continue to live such a meaningful and purposeful life. And instead of having bitter and rage, continuing to see the promise and the good in humans. And so I think, resiliency is something that book taught me. And I would say the other thing that book taught me is, unfortunately, if people are not held accountable for their actions, we now have an idea of how low societies can go.
You think?
Times may seem crazy now, and there's a number of reasons why I think that may be the case. But all things being said, the world's in pretty good shape right now if you compare it to back then.
Yeah, that's the case.
And it's sobering, but to think that could never happen again it's just naive. And so I think for someone who did not have the experience of being alive during that time or being close to that time, to have a real understanding, a deep understanding of it, I think it's important to read literature that reminds us of where we have been as humans and as a society.
Right. And the name of the book again?
Night by Elie Wiesel.
Perfect. Thank you. And what one final piece of advice do you have for our listeners?
Going off the theme of my book recommendation is to never give up and to be resilient. I'd say it's always darkest before the dawn. And so resiliency is something that has served me very well through my career and my personal life. And so I would recommend everyone just do their best to put things into perspective. And, one thing I do to actually an actionable thing that I try to do that helps me, I think, become more resilient. Of course, you can't just manufacture challenge, but one thing that you can do, I have a meeting with myself. And it might sound crazy, but I shoot for once a week. Sometimes that's once every 2 weeks, but I will literally look in the mirror and go through, a checklist of what's going on. Is this what I envision doing this week? Is this what I'm envisioning doing this quarter, this year? Am I on the right path still? Do I need to make any changes? Am I dealing with the challenges that I have on my plate right now in the best way? Am I continuing to take care of my physical health? Am I continuing to take care of my mental health? I think it's really important for leaders and for everyone to just, truly have a meeting with yourself and just ask yourself, is everything on schedule? Is everything going well? And if not, address it. And I think that builds resiliency because you're able to, instead of letting problems snowball into something it's seemingly insurmountable, you deal with them as they come up.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing that and joining us on the show today, David.
Thank you, Greg. It's been a pleasure.
And how can our listeners get a hold of you?
Sure. I'd love for any interested listeners to reach out. So I'm happy to share my email. My email is david@farmtogether.com. I'm also on Twitter. My handle is Dave Ed Chan, so DAVEEDCHAN, and also happy to connect on LinkedIn. So anywhere you want to find me on those platforms, please do.
Perfect. And your website is?
www.farmtogether.com.
Excellent. And you can find show notes from today's podcast at urbanfarm.org/farmtogether. Hey, if you've enjoyed this podcast and are interested in listening to my first podcast series, Freshly Green from 2007, you can subscribe to support the Urban Farm Podcast. With that, you will have access to Freshly Green and so much more bonus content. Visit urbanfarmpodcast.org to find out more and to pledge your support.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode of the Urban Farm Podcast. Remember to listen for tips, advice, and resources to help you on your journey with urban farming. You can find us on the web at urbanfarm.org or send us an email to podcast@urbanfarm.org. In the words of Vincent van Gogh, great things are done by a series of small things brought together. Be encouraged that with each lesson learned and skill developed, you are one step closer in the direction of your dreams.